Welcome to the Campus Outreach Staffcast, a podcast for Campus Outreach staff by Campus Outreach staff.
You are there for me.
I am your host, John Elam, and with me is the Campus Outreach Serve Executive Director, Kent Bailey. Hey, Kent, welcome back to the podcast.
John, great to see you as well.
We are gearing up still for the Worldwide Day of Prayer coming up April 2nd of this year.
Right.
The last podcast, we talked a lot about Reverend Barker and his legacy within the ministry, and specifically his legacy of prayer. And we want to discuss and dialogue a little bit today about how prayer has really been fundamental as a practice and a value of the ministry.
That's great. Well, when you hit the nail on the head there, just in terms of it being a value, and I'll get into some of the story of that maybe in a minute. But as the ministry was growing and developing, we got to a point, maybe 10 or 12 years in, early 90s, I guess. And we said, we talk about values, but we've never written them down. And so I remember we were having a discussion and we came up with 16 values that were going to be the values of Campus Outreach. And we quickly said, no, that's too many. And so we began to kind of work with those and think about those. But one thing that was on the list that was clear from the beginning was prayer, the importance of prayer. And the way that ultimately got worded was that we were believing God's promises and we were praying for God's action. And I thought that was a great summary. I'm not sure even remembering who came up with that exactly or how the group came up with that. But just that idea of God's promises are real and they're something that we're to be claiming and remembering and bringing before the Lord himself, but then just praying for God to work. And so, from the beginning, from the earliest days, it really has been a value, continues to be a value. And, you go on the website, it's there, but more importantly, you can go and visit ministries and you see how prayer is such a vital part.
What are some of the examples, kind of the classic examples or ones that were most impactful in your experience?
Well, it's funny when you go back to how prayer became such a vital part of the ministry. It actually was through persecution, because in the early days, before there was a Campus Outreach, it was just Briarwood sending Curtis Tanner and Tom Carradine as staff members over to the campus. Because of the evangelism that they were doing on the campus, they quickly were kicked off campus. The administration says, you guys can no longer come on campus because it's disruptive what you're doing in terms of evangelism. That's sad. That was when the ministry, quote unquote, was just getting started. And so it's like, well, then what can we do? What can happen on campus? And the students involved in the ministry at that point decided, let's have a prayer meeting. It never varied from being at 6 a.m. in the morning, but sometimes it was every day for, a period of time. Sometimes it was a couple times a week, sometimes one time a week. But talking to people and, being a part of that, there was just this expectancy that God was going to work. And the interesting thing about those prayer times was that it was a little bit about the campus and it was a lot about the world. And so there was, yes, I'm, over in my dorm praying for my Bible study or, the evangelism I'm doing there, or praying for these particular people, but it was always praying for the nations. And so, you went to this group that was praying and it wasn't, somebody is having a physical ailment or, something like that. Those are things that need to be prayed about, but it was people taking seriously God's command and his call to us to pray for laborers, particularly to be sent out to the nations. And so it's just funny that what the administration meant to kind of halt the ministry led to prayer, which was really the thing that advanced the ministry. And so, for a long time, there wasn't a weekly meeting. There wasn't any other activity, if you will, on campus other than a prayer meeting. So really from the very beginning, it was prayer that was the foundation of the ministry getting started.
Kent, as the ministry, after those experiences that you just talked about, as the growth of the ministry and the partnership with different churches through Briarwood, as expansion of the ministry began, what would you say was the role and even the value of prayer as the ministry came into a new season of franchising out and expanding to new places?
Yeah. Well, John, even before that, prayer was such a part of the gospel and the ministry going from campus to campus. And today we think about that as pretty much a staff-directed occurrence. Back then, it was students. It was students praying for other campuses, their friends on other campuses where there was no ministry. And so there were students that were down at UAB here in Birmingham, and they were praying for Montevallo, and some of them transferring to Montevallo to see the ministry go there. I was on staff at Troy, and some of the guys there in the ministry had friends who went to Valdosta State, over the neighboring state over in Georgia. And so they said, we want to get together Friday night, pray, and we want to pray until God answers us about some of us transferring to a different school. A bunch of us got together, prayed, and over the course of that evening, it seemed like that there were 4 guys who were going to leave that school, transition over to another school, not because they had, a major that they were really interested in, or because they were going to get an in-state tuition discount or anything like that. It was simply to see the gospel go over there. And so said, great, you guys are the 4 that are going to go. And the next fall they went, and Steve Singletary went as the staff member to go with them. Exciting to think about students taking responsibility. And maybe that is happening in places now, but just to see that happening more, just even on the campuses where we are, praying about unreached places on the campus and how the gospel could go out. So as you said, from the very beginning, it was such a part of seeing the gospel go out was through prayer.
When I think of campus outreach as a ministry, when I've had to explain in short sentences, it is a possibility to say campus outreach is a campus ministry that essentially is committed to 2 things: evangelism and discipleship. In your opinion, seeing not only just the foundation that was laid, but also over these years and the connection that you have and continue to have with different regions all over the globe, what would you say is the practice and the presence of prayer within a ministry that is committed to evangelism and discipleship?
Yeah, I think that's been such a key part all along the way for campus outreach. And I think that I know we talked earlier about Reverend Barker's example, but you go to a lot of groups or churches or Christian meetings, and people talk about prayer. The thing that has always struck me about campus outreach is that just people pray. And so I can't tell you how many times I've heard testimonies like that of, I became a Christian and, one of the first things I got invited to was to pray with some people. Or maybe I had been a Christian for a while, but never really engaged much in prayer. And then someone's discipling me and they said, let's spend 30 minutes or an hour in prayer. The person was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could do that. And sure enough, 30 minutes passed by quickly as they were praying, or an hour or however long it was. And they began to say, wow, prayer is real. And this is not just something that people talk about. It's something that people actually do. And I've always loved that about campus outreach, just that sense of, it's wonderful to talk about it, to hear exhortation towards prayer, but even better is just to pray, and how people are doing that today all around the world. I think the other thing to me that I've always loved about campus outreach is us holding up examples of prayer. And so I know the book Dolls about Dawson Trotman probably is not used much anymore, but there were years where that was the book everyone read on the Beach Project. And the whole idea was, here was a man who just took prayer seriously, who believed the promises of God, prayed the promises of God, and believed God to work, and saw God do incredible and amazing things. And, today I hear so much in terms of what people are reading, good stuff, maybe it's more theological or cultural issues. I love it when I hear somebody saying, I'm reading this missionary biography, or I'm reading a story about someone who really prayed, and it's really encouraging me in my prayer life. And I hope that's something that is always true for campus outreach, that we're taking advantage of learning from those great examples that we have in the body of Christ.
As we come near to the April 2nd date for our 2024 Worldwide Day of Prayer, I want to share a little bit more about what this year is bringing in terms of theme and even our motivation from the Word, our encouragement. This year, we really want to focus on rejoice, pray, and give thanks. And I'm not sure if everyone really understands how we go about this Worldwide Day of Prayer, but given that we do have multiple locations in multiple places throughout the world, regions laboring under the authority of local churches throughout the world, we have the benefit of people being in multiple different time zones. And that would give us the opportunity to really think about 24 hours of unbroken prayer throughout this day, where people throughout the world in different places in the world, not only ones that have to stay up to the wee hours of the morning, but really people who are engaged in their day. These are not just staff members. These are not just students. These are alumni. These are supporters. These are church members, Christians throughout the world, engaging in 24 hours of prayer to rejoice, to pray, and to give thanks. We have found our encouragement this year specifically in 1 Thessalonians 5, 16, 17, and 18, which says, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." Kent, I imagine that you are participating in the worldwide prayer.
Yes.
Great. Really want to encourage as many of our staff and as many of our regions as possible. Discipleship groups, support groups that are out there to join us also. If you could kind of give a charge for people who maybe haven't participated previously, or they have participated and they're maybe wavering and thinking about participating this year, what would you say?
Yeah, John, just a couple things. One is just to take advantage of the opportunity, the privilege that we have. What we're replicating here would be parallel to Paul's letters that he wrote to the churches in the New Testament. He is writing, "I'm praying for you. I'm constantly thinking about you." He's, writes out his prayers of the things he's praying. And then he's sending that via courier to that church. Could take months to get there. And he hopes that they get it. He hopes that they know that he's praying for them. I think if you had gone to the Apostle Paul and said, "Paul, you could have, you're now in Jerusalem, let's say, but you could have an hour of prayer with the church in Ephesus," Paul would say, "Are you kidding? I would miss that for the world. I want to pray with them. I want them praying for me. That's the most incredible thing." He would have been blown away. And we kind of take it for granted. And so the last couple of years, as we've had the days of prayer, and every hour that I've participated in that, it's always the same reaction, as there is the group from one side of the world praying with the group from the other side of the world. And honestly, a good bit of some time is spent, and people going, "I didn't even know there was a ministry there." Like, what language do you speak? Where, tell me your story. Just that incredible privilege that we have to pray for one another. And we know and we trust that that's going on all the time, but just to actually do it together is amazing. And every one of the hours, as I said, that I've participated in, people are always astounded, like, this is amazing that we get to pray together. So one would just be take advantage of the technology we have, of the privilege that we have. And then secondly is connect it to World Vision. I would just challenge every person that's listening to this, bring a disciple to pray with you. And it's just easy. And they may say, "Oh my goodness, to pray for an hour, that's so long." So it'll pass by quickly. It won't kill you. You'll enjoy it. But the few people I've seen do that up to this point, you can just see in these young disciples, like, this is incredible. I'm getting to pray with somebody from another country. I'm getting to hear a little bit of their story. And you can just see the lights coming on of World Vision for them. And I've just always been so excited about that, so encouraged about that. And so I would just ask everybody who's listening, bring a disciple with you, pray together. If nothing else, you'll get to pray together for an hour. Teach them and model for them prayer. That will go a long way toward building World Vision in their life.
That's great. I appreciate that charge. I have definitely benefited in the past. I've had the privilege of participating a few years when I was still in Brazil with people from discipleship groups, previous discipleship group supporters. It is an exciting time, I do admit. I'm excited about participating for the first time this side of the equator. So that is coming up April 2nd. Within the description of the podcast, we are going to include the link to sign up for our Worldwide Day of Prayer. Join us. Heed to Kent's charge to not only bring those who you are investing in, bring those who have previously invested in you, those who are continuing to partner with you as you labor on the campus throughout the world. We're excited to see what God is going to do, how he's going to open up the harvest field for different places throughout the world throughout these 24 hours of prayer and the years to come. So thank you so much. We'll see you guys on April 2nd.